Hopefully, this video will help you prepare for your assessment on a personal hero of mine, a crown-crushing, Charles-chopping, Puritan proselytising, look it up, Oliver Cromwell. So we better start at the beginning, or at least at the start of the English Civil War. Now if you remember, King Charles I, arguably England's most attractive monarch, no offence Liz, was not thrilled about having to share power with Parliament. He and his supporters, called the Royalists, argued that Charles should do what the heavens he likes. Why? Well, because of the heavens, obviously. King Charles and his God-bothering brethren argued that God himself wanted Charles to be king. If God wants Charles to be king, then no one should be allowed to disagree with Charles, because to disagree with Charles is like disagreeing with God. Now if you remember, this theory is called the divine right of kings. Obviously, the folks he shares power with, the Parliament, disagree with this idea. Although they are super religious, they do not think that God puts people on the throne. So when Parliament refused to give Charles money for a war in Scotland, Charles gets in a right strop, calls over his pals who basically chant "fight, fight, fight," and war is declared. Now, let's move swiftly on. The Civil War goes on from 1642 to 1649, with many battles being fought. What we learn from these battles is that some MPs are rubbish at being war leaders. And I mean really rubbish. So much so that Oliver Cromwell and some of his chums arrange a deal where MPs are not allowed to lead armies because of their issues. And by their issues, I mean their suckishness. Cromwell also thinks the parliamentarian army needs a reshuffle, and so he massively changes it. Gives it a snazzy name, the New Model Army, and rather than being led by a group of posh MPs, anyone is allowed to be a leader, as long as they are, well, not sucky at the job. This works an absolute treat, and after faffing around with Charles for a few years, he's eventually put on trial, and Cromwell, who is now essentially the leader of the parliamentarians, organises a guilty verdict and Charles is executed. Whoa! Who rules England now? It's always had a king. Even before England was ruled by a king, it had kings, local ones. So England needs a leader. And eventually Oliver Cromwell proclaims himself Lord Protector of the country, which is very nice of him. Now, for our assessment, we have to focus on what people thought of him at that time. So let's have a look-see at the key groups. Number one is the Royalists. Obviously, as believers of the divine right of kings, the idea of Parliament disagreeing with God's chosen one shocked them. The idea of Parliament executing God's chosen one appalled them, and they obviously blamed Cromwell for this. And it makes sense, as Cromwell was the man who took power once Charles died. They argue that Cromwell should not rule England, and only got away with it because his New Model Army backed him up. They claim that people would have stood up to Cromwell if he didn't have an army behind him, and they're probably right. But what about the New Model Army? They're our number two. Spoiler alert, they love him. Cromwell is a legend who led them to victory against the Royalists over and over again. In the Battle of Naseby, the New Model Army was on the brink of losing when Cromwell's cavalry charges and saves the day. Parliament weren't expected to win the Civil War, and the fact they did was largely due to the awesomeness of its leaders, including Oliver Cromwell. As such, after the war, they were more than happy to help him. What's that, Cromwell? You want to close down Parliament? Sure, no worries, we'll help you. What's that, Cromwell? You want to pass really tough Puritan laws, including the banning of Christmas? Sure thing. Lastly, what about the Irish? Well, the Irish absolutely love Cromwell. They even renamed St Patrick's Day to St Ollie's Day and get drunk on water to celebrate. Oh, no, that's my mistake, just kidding. They hate him. Why? Well, since 1641, so that's before even the Civil War kicked off, they'd been rebelling against English rule. Even Charles struggled to deal with them. During the Civil War, England kind of left them alone. However, once that's all done and dusted, Cromwell decides he's going to solve the problem once and for all. And he does. Brutally. You've seen lots of sources about what the English get up to. Some of them are likely to have been exaggerated, but a lot of them should be quite truthful. Remember, Cromwell is a Puritan, and the Irish were Catholics. Cromwell believed that the Catholics were going to go to hell anyway, so assumed that whilst he was killing them, he was actually doing God's work, which is very thoughtful of him. Maybe. So it's up for you to decide. Did people back then see Cromwell as a hero or as a villain?